All right, for this video, I wanted to talk with you about the deductibility of business work clothes, right? So if you're a new business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you've got your entity set up, and you're engaged in a trade or business, can you deduct clothes that you have to buy and then wear for work? Now, I see a lot of really bad advice in this space. More of it falls on the side of, yeah, go ahead, just write everything off, right? You bought it for business use, you can deduct it. Absolutely not true. Okay, so what are the rules for deducting business clothing? Well, whenever we talk about business tax deductions, we always start with Section 162 of the tax code, right? So under Section 162, you are allowed a deduction of all the ordinary and necessary expenses in furtherance of that trade or business, right? Now, whether the expense is going to be ordinary and necessary, it's not specifically defined, right? So it's always a question of fact whether the expenditure that you incurred is ordinary and necessary in connection with your trade or business. And it's always the taxpayer's responsibility to meet that burden of proof, right? So the IRS obviously wants everything to be personal in nature because under Section 262A, personal expenses are not deducted. So they're always going to try to push you in that direction, which is why when you take a business tax deduction on your return, the burden is on you to prove that it is a business expense, right? It's a legitimate business expense. Now, the tax court case that kind of got us started here is the Yeomans v. Commissioner case, right? So this is a 1958 case, and the court there established basically a three-factor test. So in order for it to be deductible, the clothing has got to be required or essential in that taxpayer's employment, right? So it's required as part of the job. The second element there is the clothing is not suitable for general or personal wear, and the clothing is not so worn, so not worn for personal use, right? Most companies will fail this second part, right? So when they buy something, it fails that second test, which is that the clothing can be suitable for general or personal wear, right? So a couple of court cases here that illustrate this point. The first one here, now there's many cases out there, but these are, I think three of the significant ones, and this last one here is pretty recent. So in the Heinz case, we had John Heinz here. He was a television announcer, and as part of his contract, right, because he's on air, he was required to look presentable, right, dress in a business-like manner, look presentable. So he wore a suit, right? So he wore suits, tie, nice dress shirts, and he had to buy all his own clothing. Well, he tried to deduct the costs of those clothes on his return as an unreimbursed business expense, and the IRS disallowed the claim, right? And they disallowed the claim because of this second element there, right? So the clothing, yeah, you might have bought the suits because you're going to wear them on air, but they can still be used for general or personal use. It's a suit, right? You can wear it out in public, you can wear it to a dinner function, you can wear it anywhere you want, right? And so for that reason, they said, well, look, it's really not business clothing that can be deducted, so we're not going to allow it. The Steiner case, the second one down there, this was interesting because what they highlighted was that even if you can prove that I would never have, under any circumstances, bought these clothes except for this job, it still doesn't matter, right? So this was an airline stewardess, and she argued, well, look, the only reason I bought these articles of clothing is because I got this job. And they said, yeah, that's fine, but again, if the article of clothing can still be converted to or adaptable to general or personal use, then it's not going to be deductible. All right, and then in the last one there, the Barnes case, we have Barnes here. He's a young man. He was a salesman at a Ralph Lauren store, and he was required to wear polo Ralph Lauren clothing, right? It makes sense. Well, he purchased the clothes so he could dress up for work as asked to by his employer. And then he tried to deduct the costs on his return, and he wasn't allowed to deduct the costs, right? And because it fails to meet this not suitable for general or personal wear test, right? So the first one, a lot of times the clothing might be required for your employment, right? But you need to meet all these elements, right? So that second one there, well, look, if your employer required you to go out and buy, solid white polos, because that's the dress code, If that white polo is suitable for general or personal use outside of your office, even if you're not wearing it outside your office, it's still going to fail this test, right? So business owners, right? If you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to go out on a shopping spree, I'm going to get a bunch of nice suits, and then because I'm going to, I want to look good and presentable for my clients. You're not going to be able to deduct these, okay? You cannot deduct the costs of personal use clothing, even though you just happen to use it for business purposes sometime. Okay, so that's not the answer I think a lot of business owners want to hear, right? Obviously, you would want to deduct as much as possible, but in this case, you can't, right? So really carefully scrutinize the clothing item. Is it required or essential for use in the business, right? That's the first test. And then that second piece, the adaptability. Can this thing be used for general or personal wear? If it can, then it's not deductible. Now, what some companies will do is, and this will work, if you put emblems or some kind of decal or some kind of stitching on the clothing to modify it, right? So if you work at a restaurant and you're told to buy a polo and then they stitch on the restaurant's logo or name, then that would be okay, right? Because now it's not only required for employment, but it has been adapted in such a manner that it's no longer suitable for general or personal wear. Okay. All right, so I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below. Happy to answer when I can, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Thank you.